Today we're going to start on training you for the receiving of new material at Evans Metal Products. When we receive material, it's been rolled at some rolling mill, and when you receive the material, we want you to find out, does it match up with what the purchasing agent has done? Make sure that your driver or the driver who's delivering the material is checked in with our office. And you have a list of what you're to receive. You should have a copy of our purchase order. Check with the purchasing agent for that. Now, you're going to need to check with what we receive against the quantity and the profile of what we've ordered. Immediately report any shortages to the purchasing agent, and whatever you do, don't unload any material that's not correct. We sometimes get charged for that extra material. We don't want to do that anymore. Now, when we receive the material, we look at the material and see if it is straight. Look from end to end. So get in the back of the truck, looking down the other truck or at the truck. There's some terms that you're going to need to know: camber, sweep, and twist. If the material is not straight, please note it on the shipping ticket that goes back to the vendor and also to John, our purchasing agent. Now, when you get the material in, you're going to notice a couple things. But if they're a sweep or camber or a twist, these we need to know right away. Camber and sweep cost us money to straighten them out, so we need to make sure that the vendor knows that there's an extra charge that's going to be coming. Now, sweep is the easy way. It's the part that shows us. Here, let's take a look at this. The sweep is on the right hand side, and you can see the distance is a measure of the sweep on that particular beam. The way you do it is you measure the overall length, and then you measure the bow in it, and we'll see if it meets the requirements of the product. Now, you can take a look at the camber on the beam, and you're going to see that's the hard way. Again, you measure it very simply from going from end to end, and then measure the distance of the bow. In both cases, you want to make sure to say something to the driver and write it down on the ticket. Now, here's how you figure it out. If the flange of the beam is 6 inches or over, it's 1/8 of an inch per foot. And the way you do that is, let's say if it's a 40-foot beam, you divide by 10, 4, and that's 4/8. If the flange is less than 6 inches, it's the same. The sweep is a little bit different. It's less forgiving on the sweep. Now, there are some situations where the beam flange and the beam depth are the same. In that situation, under 45 foot, you measure the length divided by 10 times the number of eighths. So if it's 40 foot, you get 4, 40 divided by 10 is 4. 4 times 1/8 is 4/8. But the maximum for columns is 3/8 of an inch. Occasionally the beam is not rolled square, and you can see this in the diagrams. How do you know what's acceptable though? Let's take a look at the letters. A is the distance from the top to the center. You see that in both sides. The B is the flange width. C is the distance between the very top and the very bottom. And you see a T, and you also see a T1. We're going to look at all of those dimensions. So let's take a look at the table. If the beams are 12 inches, up to 12 inches, the A dimension is 1/8 of an inch. The B dimension is 1/4 of an inch over and 3/16 under. Let's go back to those diagrams. A is 3/16 of an inch, so plus or minus the height from here to here. It could be adding plus or minus. Let's go back and take a look at the tolerance again. 1/8 of an inch, plus or minus. The flange width could be over 1/4 of an inch or under 3/16 of an inch. So let's take a look. This B dimension could be over or under. Let's take a look at the next set. The T1, the difference between T and T prime, the flanges being out of square, would be 1/4 of an inch for 12-inch beams, 5/16 for something longer than or larger than a 12-inch beam. The off center of center line, 3/16, and then the theoretical cross section in depth, that's the C, 1/4 of an inch. So let's go back quarter, 3/16, quarter. Let's go look at the drawings. 1/4 of an inch between here and here. It could be off 1/4 of an inch. 3/16 would be the center line dimension. It could be off. So you divide this, that would give you the E dimension, and it could be off 3/16 of an inch. Get the right one here. Now you have the C dimension, and that's the overall dimension here. And there's a maximum dimension given right there of 1/4 of an inch. Now it could happen very simply if you had a T. Normally they're split down the middle. It's the same tolerance as you'd have for a beam. You would have steel shapes such as angles and bulb T's and Z's. Could even have some channels being rolled a little bit off. If the beam comes in with a twist, or some material comes in with a twist, you need to report that. That's very difficult to take out, and we probably would need just to ship it back to them. Now, in addition, you want to check to see if there's any kinks or chain damage. If it's been bent by lifting it, by the way, that means that as you unlift something, you have to lift it correctly so that you don't bend anything for us to fabricate. Or is there some other damage? If there is any of those issues, then you need to report them on the vendor's shipping ticket as well as ours. Now, there are other terms that we're going to use. Does it have any holes or cracks, or is it peeling or trimming or lamination? Are there seams, imprints, long defects, cracked edges, or burrs? And rather than just tell you about those, let's take a look and see what they might look like. You can see the transverse defect, something in the rolling the long distance. They could have holes in the beam. They could be cracked. The projections or peelings or trimmings or seams, we sometimes call those laminations. You could even see some imprints, something that got caught in the rolling mill, and as a result you could see it squeezed right into the product. If there's a long defect being rolled through the beam, we need to know that. And if there's any cracked or edges at the any burrs at the edge, we need to know these things. So having known all these things, this is what it takes to receive material at Evans Metal. You need to know what you're receiving. You need to go back and check it against the ticket. Make sure that you note things on the shipping ticket that goes back to the vendor, also noting it to us in-house, the purchasing agent. In the event someone's not there, you get a hold of the president. That person will go ahead and help you out there too.